Jeffrey, you well?
Yeah, good, thanks, David. Yeah, not bad. Been a lot of flooding and rain over here. Not where we are, but generally.
It's coming here next week. I think we've got about 4 or 5 days non-stop from midweek.
Rains, you don't think of it like it's still warm, but it's rained since absolutely was poured down since last Thursday evening.
Hi, Jeff.
How are you, Jenny?
Good, thank you.
That's the story. It's good over here, thanks.
Welcome along to our meeting, 6th of July 2022. I just ask councillors to stand for our karakia and affirmation. And welcome Jeff online and Jenny online as well. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā tara tara ki tai, e hi akia nā te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hohu, tihei mauru ora. And the affirmation, let us affirm today that we as councillors will work together to serve the citizens of Selwyn District, to always use our gifts of understanding, courage, common sense, wisdom and integrity in all our discussions, dealings and decisions so that we may solve problems effectively. May we always recognise each other's values and opinions, be fair-minded and ready to listen to each other's point of view. In our dealings with each other, let us always be open to the truth of others and ready to seek agreement, slow to take offence and always prepared to forgive. May we always work to enhance the well-being of Selwyn District and its communities. We will. Thanks, everyone. Apologies today from Murray Lemon, is the only one that's not with us. The mover and seconder, thanks Epiha and Alexander. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. There's been no extraordinary business other than to say there was an email from LGNZ which concerns matter number 9 on page 26 with the remits for this year. There's been an additional remit that was circulated, which we'll get to in that discussion. Conflicts of interest that people would like to raise before the meeting. Councillor Miller.
The easement discussion around Central Plains Water.
Great. Deborah.
Tab 21 and 22 on PX.
Yeah,
Thank you. And Mark.
I'm the same. I think they're PX 2 and 3 on the agenda.
Yeah. Thank you. The 4 hearing commissioners have identified those. in the PX, part of our agenda. Today we have public forum. Mr. Tim Sanson is here to discuss flooding issues at Taumotu. Tim, welcome along to the meeting. If you'd like to take a seat up the front. There's a PowerPoint slides and some photos and images that Tim will be showing us today. And Tim has sort of explained before we allow about 10 minutes for this discussion. There might be some question and answers from councillors here, so really keen to hear what you have to say. We won't be debating your particular issue in this meeting, but we'll review what we've heard and usually ask for some sort of report as a follow-up before making any decision. So I'll hand the floor to you. Just press the right-hand button on the microphone and it turns it on, and then everyone online will be able to hear you. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come along and have a chat. As you're probably aware, there's been a bit of flood damage out Taumotu way. That green arrow depicts our house, and that's basically a farm, that triangle where all the water is, which has happened just recently. A lot of people are of the view that that is the only time this has happened. I've been trying to get hold of council and ECAN for the last 2 years. This has been going on. I've had no response. It wasn't until I had a sudden brainwave to get hold of Councillor Epiha that I was able to get some traction around what's happening. Just so I know the people I'm talking to, it's not to put anyone on the spot. Just give me a quick show of hands, anyone that's been out for a look, so they know what's going on out there. Has anyone been out? And since this? Okay. Righto, so that I'll take it as none of you have seen it. So I'm not too good with the old PowerPoint, so bear with me. So this is just to give a bit of a view of where we are. You can see the wee blue spot there that shows us, narrows it a wee bit more, very close to Lake Ellesmere. We're essentially the last farm before you get to Lake Ellesmere, heading towards Banks Peninsula. This is what we bought. This is the best photo we could find. In the foreground, and I don't know how to show you this, but in the foreground at the edge of the sand, that's a bank all the way along. And it's quite a high bank. It's deceptive to look at there. And it was there when we bought the place 4 years ago. This is what it looks like now. The water's obviously drained away in different areas. The bank's completely gone. All those red spots show you the paddocks that are unusable. There's still another one to this end. They've been inundated with salt water and sand. The one with in the green, that's the only one we've got left that hasn't really been touched, which is quite good because that's where my cricket pitch is. So needs to be looked after. So you can see the amount of damage there. The guy that's been leasing the place, and I've got some handouts that I think someone was going to print for me. Okay, this is from BlackRock. Paul Dorset Stud, who leases my place. We'll talk about the effects of that as we go. But I'd urge you to read that later on. It'll give you a bit of an indication of what it's costing those people, let alone the 2 years of $7,500 that we've missed out on for leasing, because you can't lease property like that. I certainly can't sell it. So if you have a look at the compass at the bottom, comes as a surprise to most people, but that beach is actually south of us. It's not the east coast at all, which is why the southwesters in particular give us a real hiding. Now this culvert down the bottom that you see is, we presume, no one seems to actually know, the council culvert, which the bridge got washed away. You'll see a bit more of this as we go through. And that's giving an indication of, that green arrow just shows that I'm looking back towards the house when I took that photo, and that's the sand and debris that came in, blew the bridge out, and it's happened 2 or 3 times since. And it's just left that culvert standing there by itself. And the yellow arrow depicts out to your right, roughly where it sits, which is on the corner of Gulliver's Road, which is, yeah, not so great. This is a little bit harder to see, but hopefully you understand the key to all this. So the red dots themselves are the compromise to the bank, the ones closest to the sea. And the other 3 red dots indicate neighbours' properties. that have been affected by the creek, which is council managed, backing up when it blocks up. So we've got a dairy farmer who's got approximately 20 to 30 hectares unusable now because it's had salt water across it, so nothing grows. And that's a very high producing farm, so it's difficult for them. The rest is Blackrock Stud again, who have been leasing our place, and not including our place, they've probably got another 30 odd hectares unusable now. When you've got a stud sheep farm of sort of 400 acres, that's going to put the real pressure on. They rely on that feed, which you'll see in the report that they've made up for what's got, not made up, that they've produced. The yellow line, the blue dotted line is just showing you the direction of the creek that the council manage. And the orange cone is the big compromised area again, down by where the creek is, if that makes sense to you guys. Okay. Just stop me if you want any clarification. Yeah. That's okay.
Trying to get my bearings. Is that behind the marae?
So
That's the
marae,
creek that flows through and goes through the
yes,
Tamutu
so
marae.
it's a spring-fed creek further up from our place on McLaughlin's Road, and it comes down and it flows out into the lagoon at the lake there.
Okay.
So that yellow line also shows where the bank was destroyed. So Fisherman's Point, straight opposite Fisherman's Point, is where they open the lake. Right, so that yellow line is the track in from the old church down from the marae.
Yeah.
That's the track into there, essentially, into where they have all their machinery
Okay.
to do their work. So this end of the yellow line is basically the crossing when you go over past the old church.
And sorry, just to get my bearings again,
Yes.
I know you haven't been here long. The Tiamutu culverts, have you heard of those?
Taumutu culverts.
Yeah, yeah. Have you heard of those?
Only the one at the bottom of our place,
Okay,
which is where the bridge is. There's no other culvert between there and the lagoon.
okay, there's,
There's two different creek systems down there. So there's
Right.
another creek runs up by the marae,
right,
and that comes down. I can't even remember the name of the road, the
Right.
tar seal bit, ours is on gravel. So it
Right.
runs down the side of that. So that's probably where you're thinking. So there's a culvert at McLaughlin's Road, or two of them.
two of them. That's-
Yep, there's one, and then you go about another kilometre down, there's another one. So they go spring, the creek runs culvert, creek, culvert, all the way down to your bridge, which has got a culvert pipe in it, and that's all that's in there at the moment.
Thanks for that.
No worries. So this is to give a bit of an indication of the scale of what's going on. So the orange arrow, well, there's your bridge for a start, and there's the track of the creek. The other creek is at the end of that top road, about where the E is on shoreline, which is where the marae is. And it runs along basically that green line. And so there's the creek there, and where that orange cone is at the bottom here is where the bridge was. And you can see where the track was for the public access. And that other one's at the crossing down past the old church, where the other orange cone is. This here is the paddock directly behind our house, which you'll see a picture of me getting washed away there later. That's basically our boundary fence. Now that was a big line of bushes and a fence right there, quite high, 2 to 3 meters along there. Over to your left, that's what's left of the flood bank that was there when we bought the place, not on our place, but on across the boundary. And it should run down behind to our left there. Between our boundary, and I'm only guessing on the boundary because it's buried, between our boundary and that bank is a paper road, from what I can understand, which is this yellow and black twisty line running along the length of the beach. That fence there runs away from the beach, which is over there. Give you an idea of how much sand is collected in there. At that particular part, that's my gumboot. Give you a bit of comparison. So it's important to stress, I'm only focusing on our place, but properties further south have been damaged, or west. And yeah, probably not to the extent of us, but still not flash up around Cooper's Lagoon as well. It's an absolute mess. This will give you an indication. This is the biggest hole in our bank, apart from where the bank's just disappeared completely. So those red dots are posts. So there's a singular one. I'm standing in my paddock, looking at the sea. That's just a clod of dirt on top of the post to give you an indication of what it is. And this is from the seaside. One of the major issues we have, look at all these tracks since those flooding. The amount of people that drive up and down that beach, it never allows the beach to settle. But hey, it's a public beach, you know, I'm not going to decry people doing that. So that'll give you an indication, those red dots out there are the tops of posts that you can see. I'm trying to move on so we can not wasting your time. So the objectives and outcomes that we would like from this, and this is not just me, but it's the other farmers in the area that I'm associated with. We'd like a new bank, please, and a really, really good one. And I'll explain why as we go through here when I get to an ECAN slide that's coming up. But we need to keep that water away. We're going to lose our house. We're going to lose our retirement, which is why we bought this place. So, you know, we stand to lose the better part of $1 million. And our next option is to burn the house and the sheds down and just wander away and go bankrupt. What else do we do? Why would we pay mortgage on that? And why would a bank back us on that? So it's a lot more serious than what people believe. Everyone seems to have forgotten the human factor, and everyone seems to be ducking for cover. And no one's accountable. No one is. Apparently, it's nobody's fault. So there was a bank there before. Oh, I've gone too far. Sorry. So where that lady with the child is in the middle, that's your bridge in better times when we bought the place. It'll give you an idea of the nice wee track up there. That's half the problem, where that creek is. If that's reinstated like that, then you're going to keep getting a blocked creek because it's just creating a slide for the water to come through. Now, there's going to be video on here. I'm not sure how well it'll go, but this is all of your culvert in here, as you can see. Early on, when we had the first few floods, there were no local authority warnings at all. We got one in 2021, no warnings. And then after the Rakaia Huts got one, we tended to, all of a sudden it started coming to us in the emails, even though we were signed up to the emergency thing. Most of us living along the beach or any farmer living by a river knows when the rubbish is coming anyhow, because, you know, you've got to keep an eye on the forecast and you get to know your area a wee bit. The picture up there with the power pole in it, it's the bane of my life, that one of them. So that's the stuff that your guys left there when they came and cleaned up on Sunday, the 22nd of May, and basically dug out beside the culvert. Right, fair enough, had to go somewhere. I made that call at 10 o'clock in the morning, just after high tide, which was at 9 o'clock, and it was a Sunday, and I rang the number because you need to get someone here with a digger straight away. 2 hours later, they sent a truck with a broom on the front. I'm not sure what he's going to do. Is he going to sweep it away or something? So he left. 6 o'clock, a digger turned up along with our lawn, and they cleared it away so the water got running again. Because it was so blocked up, the water was backing up. It was going to threaten our house, and you'll see when I show you a picture of our bridge out the back, which never gets covered. It was scaring out our paddock where the water was running into the creek, and it was going all over the paddocks further up on McLaughlin's Road because it wasn't moving. So my wife put this together, so I'm hoping that the swearing's been taken out. I'm sure it has. But it'll give you an idea. That's water coming from the beach. Yep, she has. Good work. So that'll give you an idea of what's going on there and how blocked it was. Also, up there, if that was in Rolleston, there would be orange cones and warning signs everywhere. But because it's way out there, there's nothing. It's like you don't even know where we live. This is a pretty important part to me. So let's talk about the whales first. That's a mother and son Andrews beaked whale. Now they're very rare. If you don't believe me, Google it. That wasn't a result of the flooding, but it's still very important because it's buried around about where the E is and losses, up behind the bank, over the other side of the bank. Oh. Oh, well now, gee, we're in business now. I'll just watch out for the airplanes. Thank you. How do I make that work? Just push the red bit in the middle? Right, it's buried about here somewhere, about there. Both of them are buried. Now, they were washed up in our beach a few months ago. We happened to spot them as we got the marae dock all over there. We had quite the ceremony and we buried them. One of the guys from the ride, David, and I can't remember his last name, I'm sorry, is with ECAN. Dock people were there. If you remember recently, Doc found a dead Hector's dolphin out Brighton Way somewhere. Well, that was in the back of the ute when they turned up to bury these. So it was that day. So they're very rare. They're buried there and they had the appropriate burial. We spent all day looking after them until everyone gathered. Also, before I forget, back at that big pile of dirt that you left by the creek where people are still crossing. And as they do it, they're pushing the sand down into the water and it's slowing it down. I'm down there on a regular basis and always have been with a shovel, making sure things still move. The roadsides around there, we can have 20 to 30 cars with trailers, with motorbikes getting off the back, going over the top, and they leave a heck of a lot of rubbish behind. So I'm down there most Sunday nights and Monday in the summer in particular, clearing all that rubbish away. We get no assistance with looking after our roadsides, which is fine. It's our roadsides. But they're almost non-mowable now because we haven't seen a grader until yesterday, this year. And now the sides of our road are covered in gravel. The guy may as well just use a toothbrush. It's made no difference at all. But that's a whole other argument. Up here, it's a New Zealand longfin eel. Now, they're actually reasonably endangered without being to the point of no good. I'm sure most of you are aware of how important they are to the Maori out in that area. There were 9 of these sitting on top of the sand where the creek used to be. They buried a lot of them. No one had been to check, which was just absolutely disgraceful. That one, that's a size 11 boot beside it. That one there, estimated somewhere between 60 and 100 years old. And anywhere up to 20 odd million eggs or babies in it. So you take 6 of those. God knows how many else there were that we couldn't see. And the second wave of flooding that came through, I went straight down there and I put 4 across to the sea. I haven't seen an eel in the creek since. So,
Tim, I'm not sure how many more slides and things you've got to talk us through, but okay.
I'll go moving on. That there, I found that there. And that is this, if anyone's interested in having a look at it. So this dates back to Waitaha, and this stone comes from Tasman region. It's the only region in New Zealand where it comes from. This is a Mariads. If anyone wants to have a look, you're more than welcome, pass it around. That's not the only one I found in there. That's all buried now. Whatever else is in there is buried. Okay. That, not so worried about that dying, but again, it's something that died in the flood. Okay. We'll forget this through to here. All we're after is who's accountable for it or who's responsible, who can help, what can they do and when. So I'll go quickly now because I'm aware of time. Last year in 2021, we had the flood in June. So I contacted ECAN. I finally got someone. It's the only time they sent a young guy out. He came up with this, which was telling me I need a heap of consents and bits and pieces. But if you look here, council already knew, and I never heard from the council. So that was really, you know, what do you do from there? This bit here, ECAN. They will not be restoring the sandbanks along this section of the coastline. Can anyone hazard a guess why? I don't know why. Does anyone know why? Is it global warming or what? I don't know. So in the last 2 weeks, this has happened. If I can make it go. This is from the lake opening back towards my place. That's a kilometre-long sandbank they pushed up in a day and 2 hours. Yet they're not reinstating any of the bank. Now, none of that's going to work if you don't do the bank all the way along, because it's going to run in behind it. It's going to destroy your creek, even if you move your creek. And it's going to continue to destroy it, and it'll get in behind it. And if it is global warming, and if that is climate change, global warming, whatever they think it is, then why are they doing this? Why don't they let the lake become tidal?
Mm.
You know, like it's one or the other. Or does it not affect us? Solutions, that's what I'm here for. I'm hopeful that somewhere along the line, someone's going to come to me and offer some solutions and help. That's not going to cost us the earth. The only reason I haven't put a bulldozer in there to push anything up at the moment is if I start, I'll never stop paying. And I don't believe it's my responsibility. All that stuff on my farm is not mine. It's either the council's, Lynn's, or ECAN. Come and get it. Take it away. It's not mine. I don't want it there. This is just some little snippets, so I'll go straight through. We had a Radio New Zealand came, did an interview. Mr. Washington said a few words which you can't really see, unfortunately, because they're in green. I haven't been able to get hold of him, despite 3 phone calls into the office here. ECAN had a say. No one wants to ring me back. Shane Epiha came and had a look, spent a few hours at our place, which we really, really appreciated. Made a heck of a difference to those of us in the area, a bit of a morale booster, actually, to have someone take some notice. And this was his private Facebook post or public, whatever, under his councillor thing, saying exactly what we all thought. And this is me losing my dog. Luckily, I found him again. This is when the sea caught me out. So he'll pop up out the back there shortly. There he is. So they'll give you an indication of how strong that water was. This is our wee bridge behind the house. The creek's running through here, this way. And that's our bridge, except you can't see the bridge. That's your bridge. It's falling to pieces, essentially. And that's basically what I've got. I don't know what else to do, who else to turn to. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys. I would urge you, and in fact, I'd almost insist, but I can't really insist, and I invite you to come out and have a look and see what's actually going on out there. We feel neglected. We know we're only a few of us, but that's our livelihood. If half of this landed in your house, I think you'd want some action. And we'll host you, we'll feed you, we'll water you. Come and have a look, because most people turn up, in all due respect, the elected officials included, turn up to the opening of an envelope if there's sausage rolls and a camera there. Well, it might be funny to you, mate. It's not funny to me. And I'd appreciate everyone coming out and having a look, because I understand you're going to discuss this on your agenda. I'd urge you not to make any decisions until you actually know what's going on. And just to finish, I need to pay tribute to, I'm going to get her name wrong, Kate Atwood, one of your staff members, who's dealing with the drainage. She's been fantastic to deal with and keeps the communication up really, really well. But other than that, it would be safe to say we're pretty disappointed in any communication we've had from local authorities. You warn us it's going to happen, then no one turns up. What's the point? Why warn us? If I ask for a show of hands, if all the sewage pipes burst in Tennyson Street and flooded all the businesses, how many of you would go and have a look? Bet the lot of you would. But none of you turn up to this, and that would be unplanned. You knew this was coming. And no one turned up. So someone somewhere along the line needs to advocate for us and for yourselves and protect your waterway and your local treasures and bits and bobs, because otherwise it's just going to disappear. The guy across the road is going to lose 120 hectares if this carries on, and 2 dwellings. We'll be drowned by then, but that's not going to happen. And if they're going to keep continuing to protect that lake from opening by itself, it's not going to work unless they do the rest of the beach.
Thank you
Right,
for
that's me. Thank you very much.
no, thank you for coming in and
Appreciate
showing
that.
us the not only the images, but just telling your story about the impacts for you and your family in that space. I'd like to accept your offer to come in and have a look, and I'm sure other elected members would want to come with me as well. So thank you for that, and we'll organise a time that suits you to come down. There may be some questions here that councillors have, and I'll just ask them to go through that now. So Deborah and then Mark.
Oh, sorry, mine was left on just with the clarification of where the culverts were, so.
Sorry, I just want to make clear that I wasn't laughing at your presentation. I actually have a great deal of sympathy for you, so I'm sorry if that's the impression I gave. A very serious presentation and I accept the seriousness of it for you. So please accept my apology. I was laughing at the suggestion that it takes a sausage roll to get us out. Hopefully that's not the case. The question I have is, are you going to make the same presentation to ECAN?
If I can get into ECAN, I will.
Thank you.
That's the issue. How do you get into ECAN? I need help and guidance to do that from people that know how.
The way it is now, what level of weather event would it take before it floods in your place again? Is it just going to be a mild southerly, or is it going to be a sort of storm? I mean, the urgency of the situation seems to be pretty urgent, but I mean, how
Well,
soon are you likely? Because we've got bad weather coming in the weekend, for instance. I mean,
Yes, we have. But looking at so I use a Tide app that's pretty accurate, similar to the one that the guy at ECAN uses down by the lake, which is interesting. They're trying to open the lake at the moment. If they get this bad weather, it's going to close on them, but that's another story. At the moment, it doesn't take a very high tide at all to get across. So the tide normally sits at about 2.2, 2.3 meters. Goes above that, we get water in the paddock. It used to have to go to about 2.8.
so it's not
which is a
even
massive
a requirement to have a storm blowing. It's a high tide.
No, just a strong southerly. And if the southerly's coming from well south, like I've got a mate in Oamaru who always tells me when the sea's looking big there, and generally when it's looking big there and the southerly's blowing right through, a day or two later I get it. Yeah, so it wouldn't take too much.
So using your local knowledge, what if nothing happens? What do you think is going to happen? Is it going to come around the back of your place and run towards the lake and scour out right into the lake? Is it
Absolutely
make
will.
an estuary sort of thing in there?
It absolutely will, because there's two areas of public access. One of them is at the bottom of our place, McLaughlin's Road, which has no maintenance whatsoever, and it's a slide for water, and it's ruined the top of it. Blew open the bank, ruined the top paddock up the top. And what's going to happen in the creek? There was a guy, Carl. Forgive me, Carl, if you're watching this. I've forgotten your last name. Who's on the Ellesmere Drainage Board? Yep, lovely chap. He's saying what we all were sort of thinking. There's a paddock where you could cut the creek through and run it straight. Again, you've got private, partially Maori-owned land there that you're going to have to go through, which is going to make it tricky. But it'll scour out unless some form of protection's put in for it. They're talking about putting protection up to stop the sand running into the creek. Well, it'll come around behind it down our place, and the place that's going to get ruined is ours, because that will become the tunnel for everything to come to. So yeah, I think you've got a battle on your hand with looking after that creek without doing some remedial work on the beach. I accept that this may happen over 30, 40 years, that the tide might be where my house is. Surely, if we do something now, it gives time to plan. Because if that sea gets into the lake, it becomes tidal. What are you going to do with Lincoln?
Yeah, that's why I was asking the question, because they do predict that the lake will become an estuary, but is the stage one of this happening, or is there, as you say, should we put defences up there to make?
Well, I would hazard a guess that no council or ECAN are anywhere near advanced in planning to what to do when that happens with the lake. So you want to buy yourself some time. And you can probably buy it. That bank, talking to the locals that have been around here for years and years, the last time it breached this bad with water, 44 years ago. Before that, 70 years. So that bank's worked.
In meters, how many meters need remediating?
No, really hard to say. I'd be better off guessing in tons of stuff on my place. Yeah. It's not just sand and gravel. There's logs that come down the river, they come up. I would say there'd be, well, if it dries out, hundreds of tons. If it doesn't dry out, more.
So you're suggesting bulldozing the
Absolutely
topsoil off the top of your land back?
Do you know what's frustrating?
Yeah.
I was standing out the back paddock and two D9 bulldozers turtled down the beach to do the lake opening, and I'm watching them go past my place. I'd say they could spend 3 days at my place and be all gone, and it'd be in a massive bank. If they did that and reinstated the fences, the boundary fences, I'd be happy to build a bank on those fences as a secondary flood protection. But I shouldn't have to build the first one. The stuff on my place is not mine.
Thank you.
So following this, we'll debrief later, but I think a connection for you and to John Sankel, who's a local councillor, and will
Waste of
open the
time.
door into Ecan. You've tried that?
So my neighbour has, not interested.
Okay, so I'll have a chat with you afterwards. We'll follow up about how we connect you into Ecan and make sure that that happens. We'll seek a report from staff around what we've heard today, but thinking about the wider impacts and recognising that you've invited us to come down, and we want to do that before we think about what next steps look like. So really appreciate you coming in today and
No, I
sharing that with
appreciate
us.
it as well. And look, we're happy to host you. The other local farmers will turn up. We might even drag out the barbecue if you're lucky. Get a few chops on the go.
Okay. Tim, thank you for coming down today.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We run some great meetings, but you've probably done the thing that's important to you. We're on page number 6. It's tab 6. It's the minutes of the previous meeting. Moved Malcolm, seconded Bob. All those.
Good.
Sorry, there might have been some changes that needed to happen. Mark, did you?
Well, it's not a change. It's something that should be on the matters under investigation.
Okay.
Which was in the comment around the property report around Reed's Pit. It said that councillors would be advised when it was as soon as possible when it was going to be opened. 3 weeks later, we haven't been advised as to when the actual opening, when it's going to be available for the public. So that's not as soon as possible.
Okay, thanks. We'll note that, and once we know when the opening is, then that will be as soon as possible. Nicole? John, microphone, Nicole, just these guys can't hear.
It said that we excused ourselves, but we didn't in the end, whether that needs to be changed on
Oh, so during
conflicts of interest.
the matter that was discussed, Deborah and Malcolm left the room, but you remained for the conversation. Yeah.
That's on the conflicts of interest on the bottom of the minutes for that.
We'll tidy that up afterwards, Nicole, with that exact piece. Therese, thank you. Any further changes to those minutes? All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Declare it carried. The second minutes is from the 29th, the extraordinary meeting that was held. Mover and seconder. Malcolm, thanks. Seconded. Mark, any comments on those? All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? Declare it carried. The next report is mine. It's on tab 8, page 23 of today's agenda. And just want to start by acknowledging Douglas Marshall. Douglas is in the room, and just want to say, Douglas, how thankful I am and grateful for the work that you've put into our council over many years, and the huge amount of work, particularly during emergencies, that I've seen you stand up and front things that have been very important to us and to me personally. When I think through the changes that Selwyn's gone through over a number of years, you've had a major influence and hand in the success of iZone and the builds that we've provided in many of our communities in the current town centre project. And so the legacy of Marshall continues on work that will is still to be delivered. And I think that there's so much that we just start using a building and forget the involvement. And it's been quite nice thinking through the key people who have seen the aquatic centre and the sports centre opening, the Taitapu building, the West Melton building. But it's the relationships, it's not just the buildings, it's the relationships that have been formed with community over that time. So I just want to start the report by acknowledging you and saying thank you for the contribution to Selwyn District Council. And there may be some other councillors that would like to say a couple of things as well, and I'll provide an opportunity for that now if they'd like. Mark.
Yeah, I echo the Mayor's comments, Douglas. You've had a great career here at Selwyn, and we're all very grateful for your contribution, your work, very long hours you've often put in above and beyond the call of duty, and that we will hopefully still see you around and some contract work, and we look forward to seeing you perhaps at other events and things. And you can rest assured that your contribution to Selwyn, that may not be known by many, will linger on for many decades, generations.
Thanks, Mark. Deborah?
On behalf of communities that I've been associated with, I'd just like to actually thank you, Douglas, with the work that you actually undertook, working alongside those communities and actually facilitating. And I'll mention one, which was the Springston Reserve Sports Hall extension. And that followed on from Taitapu with the model that was actually structured, and then the work for many of our earthquake prone buildings. And I just want to say, thank you very, very much for the time that you took to work alongside those communities to get those facilities. Much appreciated. And the other sentiments from others I agree with too. So.
Thanks, Deborah. Malcolm?
Yeah, I'd like to echo those thoughts. And Douglas, you've always been the connector with the community. I can think of many public hall meetings where there has been tension in the room and you have handled it with aplomb on behalf of Selwyn District Council and our people. And I'd like to thank you for that. I wish you all the best in what you do in the future, but I'm not sure if we'll get to seal your road yet.
Cool, thank you. Shane?
Kia ora, thank you, Sam. I was just waiting to go around the table in order of, I guess, those that have known you, Douglas. Tēnā rā tātou katoa te rangatira. Douglas, kora matua Sam, e kaiwhakahaere David, our esteemed guests, my fellow colleagues and staff. Douglas, I've only known you for a short time and I've really enjoyed my time with you. I've enjoyed your direct nature and getting things done and stepping into spaces that perhaps others might be fearful of, and really alleviating any concerns through the community. I think 25 years of service, institutional knowledge, but also community leadership and the relationships, something that I hope we are accounting for in I was going to say your past, I mean not passing, your retirement, semi-retirement perhaps, but look, mate, on behalf of myself and my community and Murray Lemon, I wish you all the best. I wish you all the rest, and I wish you success in all the future. So I hope our councillors might like to join in a waiata. Wai makariri.
Yeah.
Sam?
Ko wai makariri ki te raki e, ko rakaya ki te raki e, te wai ora. E ora tēnei inga te oranga o ngā iwi e mawhaira e tauri mahe e mahau mahu mātātou e.
Mā te wā e te rangatira, Douglas.
There's no right for reply, Douglas, but you're presenting a report later, so I've got some chocolate for you as well to acknowledge that.
Take care, mate.
The other items that are in my report, just calendar things that have happened, just keep you updated with the meetings that have been going on around the place. So happy to move that you receive my report. Seconded, Shane. Any questions? Happy to answer. All those in favour say aye. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Next up, we have the Chief Executive Local Government remits. David.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors. There is a paper attached to the agenda, and then a supplementary paper was sent around a couple of days ago with the addition of one further remit. The Mayor and I will be attending and voting at the Local Government New Zealand AGM on Thursday, the 28th of July, and amongst the things that we'll be doing are the remits that are attached. There are 6 this year, and what we are seeking is your directional guidance in terms of how you would wish us to vote to these. You've read the paper. I don't intend to read in depth the remits themselves, but the first one is on page.
David, I'll just go. So the intention would be to support the remits that are here. Some of them either support or are neutral in feeling, and would just support our neighbours and fellow councils who are wanting to see these changes. I'm not seeing anything that makes me go, we don't want to touch that and be part of it. So hence they're coming to the table here. And if there's things that you see that you don't want us to support, then please let us know. Sorry, David.
No, that's basically what I was reading.
Mark?
Sorry, didn't get it read off. Remit 1, central government funding for public transport. I'd be happy if it was to increase public transport into our rural communities, but it isn't. It's to give free public transport to those areas that already see public transport services. So for Selwyn, it offers free public transport to some groups in Selwyn that receive a public transport service. For a lot of our rural Western communities, it does nothing except there's no free lunch. It means the taxpayer will be paying for this. And for those taxpayers who live in our areas that are not receiving public transport, they're paying for something that they won't receive. So I'm quite ambivalent on this. If this actually called for free public transport and an increase in public transport services to small rural communities, I'd be all for it. But this, much like ECAN's budget proposal, doesn't offer much for a lot of our communities and doesn't increase the level of public transport. So I prefer us to be ambivalent on this because it's a great benefit for the major metros. For the smaller rural and provincial councils, not so much, but they will be paying.
So, Mark, I'm happy to speak to that at AGM in favour of what you've just said, and we could move an amendment to that effect if there was support around our table to do that. I think that the point's well made, and that's what we've been asking ECAN to do for a long time, so it's consistent with our position as a council. And happy to hear how the other councillors feel about that. Grant?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. If you turn it around the other way, it's everybody between 25 and 65 is paying for everyone else to have free public transport. So you're sort of going, well, there's a huge swath of the Selwyn population is going to get no benefit at all, and doesn't make any sense. I agree with you, Mark.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments on any of the other remits? Sorry, Mark. Yes.
Yes, I do. I'm supportive of remit 2. 3, illegal street racing, former a subject working group. I'm ambivalent on that because what are they going to say? You know, what's the outcome? What's the subject working group going to actually do? It's illegal. The police need more support to enforce it. What's the subject working group going to do? So I'm quite ambivalent as to how it will improve the outcome on remit 3. I support remit 4 with the bylaw infringements, remit 5 on vaping, and remit 6. I'm the one that was the late circulation. Again, I am ambivalent on remit 6 because much like we've said to our community, we're not poll-driven fruitcakes. I don't see there's much benefit from it. If every time LGNZ has to make a decision, significant or not, it has to poll its members, that's paralysing. Surely, like our community elects a council to make decisions, councils elect a national executive to make decisions. You've got to trust that national executive, or at the next AGM, you move somebody else into the role. But to actually have LGNZ coming back to partner councils every time there's a significant decision, it's just going to paralyse the process. So I'd actually against remit 6.
Well, thank you for that feedback. Grant and then Cole.
Yeah, it was along Mark's comments, and Mark's probably a good one to comment. In the term that I've been here, I don't think there's been one remit that's actually gone to the annual general meeting which has actually been put into policy. So you sort of feel in some respects you're bashing your head against the wall that we do submit these remits or support remits every single year. But how many have actually been put into action and actually enacted? I guess that's something you might want to take to LGNZ and say, hey, this is a great little publicity stunt we're doing here, but actually how effective is it? And maybe there's a better method, because it seems to be an inordinate waste of time and effort if none of the proposals ever get accepted or actioned. And I can't think of one that has. And the only thing that might have, I think, is we ended up microshipping cats. Yeah, ourselves.
So that this has been raised to National Council, and the feeling is that the mechanisms there at the moment and members are taking advantage of it. But as you've said, generally to what ends when we've already got a work program majoring on the big things that we're all involved in. So I think that will change as well. Grant, thanks for raising. Nicole.
So the public transport thing. This was something that Sophie had put through as a notice of motion end of last year, which I supported, and I still support this. So I see it as being a sector of the population which would be good to be getting on public transport. We need to be promoting public transport and more users generally. Yes, I can see how it would be good. We could have wider access to public transport, and that is what we have been advocating with ECAN to get the My Way service through our district. The trial there, the one at Timaru's done really well, and it looks like it's a permanent thing for them. It is something that could suit us, and I'm sure that we have students, community service card holders and under 25s and such like in other parts of the district, just not the main towns as well. They would benefit from that as well. So I support extending it to say into the rural areas, but I still think that it is still good to be supporting this sector of the population who have little access potentially to transport and to actually so they can participate well in society. And it's, to be perfectly honest, public transport is good for everyone. So looking forward for our transport system, we need to get a greater uptake from the whole sector of the population. But this is a good start, I think. With regards to the other remits, yeah, I agree with the review of the government transport funding, and that was something that I have said quite recently to a particular government officials. So certainly support that. The illegal street racing, and this at times has been an issue around our urban areas. So I actually support that this idea. It's not talking about making a decision, it is actually getting a whole lot of groups together that maybe something would come out of it. Not really quite sure about the bylaw infringements, but I think that would be a good thing. The vaping retailers, I'm kind of shocked to read what has happened in Kaipara with the number of vaping outlets along their main street. In just that regard, I think we should support that. It's not likely maybe to be in our area, but you can see with the, well, we don't know if it be in our areas, but it's definitely an issue with the lower, potentially lower socioeconomic areas. I don't know, but it's also saying to keep it away from schools, which I think is a good thing as well. And as regards the extra one, I don't support that either. I think that will just end up being consultation fatigue. We've actually got consultation alone on all these other government things that are coming out, let alone to have LGNZ keep asking us our opinions on everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Sophie.
Yeah, I won't go through all of them, but I just wanted to support what Nicole said about the first remit, and kind of as a counter to there's no benefit to Selwyn. To be honest, reduced carbon emissions benefits everybody. We've literally just heard from somebody who has been impacted by extreme weather event, and yes, there's a factor involved in who's maintaining stock banks and everything, but literally extreme weather events, sea level rise, it's all coming. If we can do anything to reduce carbon emissions, that's great. And also it isn't so much that everyone between the ages of 25 and 65 would be paying for the rest, because I have a community services card. So I'm pretty sure I'm not alone in this district, and as somebody who's got that sort of thing, or as a student as well. So, and you know, I already use public transport, but it's just generally that's the sort of financial decisions that people are making, and it'd be good to get more bums on seats, which then helps encourage greater investment in public transport and helps as a bit of a snowball effect. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Sophie. So it's the danger of trying to draft on the go, but the amendment that I'll raise in the meeting will be something like to call on the government to start or significantly increase public transport options to rural communities. So a fairly simple sentence, but conveys the message around starting from nothing or increasing the limited service that's already there.
So that's on top of what is already
It's
there?
on top of what's there.
Okay, so it's not an either or.
No.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll move that we support what I've heard is that we support them, or we're ambivalent to them rather than we're against them, with that change that I've advised with the front line.
All right, Sam.
We'll raise.
Option.
Oh, sorry, the last one.
The
There's
six
two have spoken against it. Does anyone else have another view? Otherwise, we'll be voting against the final one. Okay. I'll move that. Seconded. Malcolm, thank you. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Declare it carried. The next item is the Finance and Performance Report. Kelvin is presenting us. Welcome to the front of the room, Kelvin.
Good afternoon, everyone. So the report is starts on page 44. If we move to the highlights section, you see there a similar trend to what we've had in previous month, where income is running ahead of budget and our operating costs below, but a net surplus before depreciation, amortization and tax of 27.7 million. Capital expenditure running behind budget, but at a similar variance to where we were in the previous period. Continue to have large volumes of consenting movement, and we're up 12% on last year with 2,891 building consents. The pleasing thing, which we know with the pressure around achieving dates, compliance dates, we are moving that trend in a positive direction. And again, we've made inroads into that in this month. So we saw 62% within the targeted time frame. Still some way to go, but a positive improvement. Likewise, resource consents are up, not quite as much, but 10%. Usage of our facilities, both in the May month ahead of where we were last year, but the impact of COVID earlier in the financial year is still having that impact, and we won't recover that impact in full this year. We just move onto page 47 and look at some of the income items. We've discussed these at previous meetings, and the trend continues with being a high growth council. We're continuing to receive development contributions at a rate higher than we budgeted, noting that these go into the pot to fund capital works in the future that support growth. So it's not something that sits on the P&L. On the other side of the equation and operating costs, our 5 Waters maintenance, we're aware of that and discussed it previously, but it will end up around 2 million at the end of the year. So, and that's really largely associated with the new support contract that we've got in place around maintenance. Transport OPEX, a reasonable large sum there above the budgeted amount, but noting that with the flood event at the very start of this financial year is driving a main part of that cost. And we have received grants, which are sitting up in the revenue to partially offset some of those costs. So they've contributed 3.7 to a 6 million cost there. Probably the other key area to focus on there is the consulting and professional fees, largely driven from the need to bring contractors in to support the staff pressures around consenting. An offsetting revenue stream is sitting in the income where we're charging out that cost. We'll move through page 49. There's no real change to where we were previously. And if we move on to capital expenditure, as said before, tracking to budget in the month, but as a whole, we're running behind budget, and we will be moving around about 40 million into next year's budget as carry forwards. And we do have the impact of supply chains and other influences which have just slowed the program up slightly, but I think we've got a positive outcome here in what we're delivering. The balance sheet, not too much movement in the month. What we have seen is the cash and term deposits coming down marginally, and that's meaning we're not having to borrow as much because we're using those. We've still got a strong cash position. Rates receivables coming down, as you would expect, as we move through that quarter, as payments come in. No new borrowings in the month, and we remain at 75.2 million. Investments on the next page, really no movement there, which is all around valuation, which will be assessed at the year-end position. And finally, performance metrics, as discussed, the community centres and halls bookings are the ones running below the targeted amount there, and won't be recovered in the year given the COVID impact. Smaller variances at some of the other centres and some other programs which have been influenced by COVID. And I will leave it there for questions.
Kelvin, thank you for that. Councillors, are there questions that you have of this report? Thank you, Mark. Move, Mark. Seconded, Malcolm. Grant.
Has this gone before the A&R committee?
Of this report, because there's no meeting.
So it hasn't been line by line to that committee. So it's not coming with that recommendation. Okay. Just looking back at the particularly our surplus, and the interesting number particularly is the correlation between CapEx underspend and our increase in surplus. Is that surplus and correlation in your mind due to the fact that we didn't achieve our CapEx spend?
No, not at all. So it's, you can see there from the development contributions make up 22.7 of the 39. And then you look at the other items here, as we had some investment income where we'd sold some properties, subsidies and grants of 5 million, which related in a large way to the flood repairs, and Waka Kotahi contributing there. The underspend, it's a continuation of a trend we've seen over a number of years.
If we achieved the CapEx spend, our surplus would have been about budget, wouldn't it?
No.
Should have been.
No.
It was 28 million if we're underspent.
No,
And the CapEx
CapEx does not go through your surplus.
not going to go through.
No, so you have operating revenue.
You wanted to-
operating
sorry,
expenses.
my
Yeah.
apology. Yeah. Second question is around the investment income. Is particularly, it seems to appear in community services and facilities on the sale of Anzac and Izone. Is that where those proceeds are being? I see at one part it's included in investment income, but then it shows up under community services and facilities.
So this relates to where they have been historically reported and continue to be reported through this year, and we'll then tidy that up going forward into future budgets to make sure it's sitting in an investment portfolio space.
Because in that same vein of investment properties, why is the Dairy New Zealand lease not included in that space?
Good question, which I'll look into.
It wouldn't be a meeting if I didn't raise my absolute unhappiness with the lack of progress on us having a viable investment strategy, particularly around the reinvestment. This year we received 3 million of extra dividend, which we weren't budgeted for, of which there's no reinvestment plan. There is no current methodology for us to advance it, or as a council use that additional income. So I want it minuted again, my absolute dissatisfaction, acknowledging, Kelvin, that you're working on it. But given that we ended at the end of the triennium and have achieved nothing over 3 years, it's a sad indictment on this council.
Thanks, Grant. Shane?
Thank you, Kelvin. I think also in the same vein as a colleague there, they are questions, Councillor Mitter, that do continually get asked around the investment. And I know, Kelvin, you've told us on a number of occasions through the Audit and Risk Committee that there's significant work going behind that to place that. Mine's a bit more low level than that. It's just around the page 48, dumping fee income, refuse charges are unfavourable budget by 1.4, partially offsetting the increased cost as higher dumping fees. My question is, are our dumping fees enough, and should they be increased more? If it's probably quite a complex question, but yeah, that's my question.
Yeah, and the reason we're in this position right at this minute with this is a seasonal factor, that the summer that we did go through, which was hot and wet, encouraged growing. So we had a high level of green refuge, the organics going through, which had an increased cost. Dumping fees, of course, are reviewed every planning cycle, and we make sure that we're seeing them at an appropriate level to, one, to recover our costs, but two, to encourage people to do the right thing around using organics, collections, and recycling.
Thank you.
Thanks for those questions and the answers, Kelvin. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Clear it carried. Thank you. We're now at tab 11 and page 56 of today's agenda, proposed gambling venue policy 2022 for adoption. So to come to the front of the room, and Jenny and Jeff, just if you want to speak during this meeting, I can't see your hand as raised unless your video's on. So you may have had nothing up to now, and I'm hoping I haven't missed something that you did want to say, but I know you were both on the hearings panel for this. So if there are things you want to raise, just please turn your video on and raise your hand. That way I'll know that it's here. So congratulations on your new role. And what first time presenting to us in that role. So no pressure. I mean, you may have family watching this live stream and being quite excited by how this is going, but
I think there's a few of Rolleston College might be watching. Yeah.
I'll throw the floor to you. Thank you.
No pressure. Thanks, everyone. Hi, I'll try and keep this brief. You'll have all read the report and the attachments regarding the review of the gambling policy, hopefully. So just as a brief summary, under the Gambling Act, and they require that territorial authorities must have a policy on Class 4 gaming venues. So a Class 4 venue relates to non-casino gaming machines, and this policy must specify if Class 4 venues can establish in the district where they can be located, and if there are any restrictions on the number of machines at the venues. So with that in mind, like the Gambling Act, the Racing Industry Act also provides that TAs must have a policy on TAB venues. So it's important to recognise that we don't have any standalone TAB venues in our district. So we adopted our first policy on Class 4 venues in 2004 and reviewed again in 2015 and December 2018. So we've got a review every 3 years, which is what we've done. So following our review, and the act and the purpose of the report is to seek the council's adoption of the gambling venue policy 2022. So section 5 of the report that we wrote has the following options. There's 3 there. The first option was to accept the recommendation of the hearing panel and adopt the amended policy. And this caps the machines at 124 and provides that they're not in residential areas, but can be relocated. Option 2 was to decline and accept the recommendation of the hearing panel. And option 3 was to modify the policy proposed by the hearing panel. So given that, option 1 was the preferred option. So over to the floor. Any questions?
Thanks for that, Sue. And the journey on this was, start in one direction, change to a slightly different direction, and the flexibility that you and the staff have shown around getting us to a place that the councillors have been able to conduct the hearing, and it's pretty clear through the report why we're landing where we are. So thank you for that. We've got a number of questions. Deborah is first up.
Okay, thank you. Look, if we can go to page 68, and it's actually the amended policy.
Yeah.
And section 2 is consent for a new Class 4 or board venue. I just want to clarify with regards to stating that the proposed venue must not locate within any living zone in an operative district plan or any residential or settlement zone in a proposed district plan. Do they actually require variations to the current plan to have them inserted as a non-complying activity, which I would assume would be given that it must not locate?
I'm not entirely sure
Is
that
there
would
any
be,
planning advice?
Yeah, I might comment.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, Sam. No, these are the two separate pieces of legislation. So this is under the Gambling Act is separate from the Resource Management Act, which is the framework for the district plan. So I don't think it's necessary to have a reciprocal set of provisions in terms of the district plan to give effect to this policy. It stands alone. That would be my advice.
So hang on. When you're actually reading it, right, only when the following conditions are met. So, and you're talking about the proposed district plan must not locate in any living zone or residential or settlement zone. Is that currently in our two plans, or does it need to be inserted in the plans to actually give meaning to this particular policy, which is under a different set? I do understand the difference. One's referring to the RMA process, and then there's the policy, but just the way I'm reading it is that this switches over into the RMA policy for enforcement or as a rule.
So in terms of administrating the policy, one would look at the provisions, and it clearly says you can't have a facility in a residential zone, relocate to a residential zone, and that would be as it reads. You couldn't do it. I don't think you need to have a set of provisions in the district plan because it doesn't work the other way around. You go to the gambling policy to see where you can locate your gambling machines. It says where you can and can't locate your gambling machines, and to me, that's the start and the end of the story.
yeah, so I can clarify that, Deborah. Under the district plan, the zoning will be set. Under this policy, they'd have to apply for a licence to have a gambling venue, and we would then look at the district plan to check the zoning.
Thank you for that. Deborah, did you have something else?
No, that was it.
Cool. Sophie?
Yeah, so myself, Jenny and Jeff were on the panel for this, and just wanted to say it was very well organised and run by staff. Thank you very much. We had some really interesting speakers. Some of them were for change, others would have liked the change to go in any other directions. But yeah, there was some interesting revelations. I was quite shocked by just how much, or rather how little funding there is available for community organisations that does not come from some kind of gambling source, which is an immense source of frustration, to be honest, when you're trying to avoid it. But anyway, what we came up with in the end, I think is probably quite good. It's not a sinking lid policy, but with our population growth, it's effectively that sort of thing. It doesn't allow for much movement or opening of any new venues or anything like that. It's kind of holding the line, but still with some positive outcomes because we are growing so fast. And yeah, just thank you again to staff. And I don't know if I'd like to move it. I don't know if Jenny or Bob, Jenny or Jeff would like to say anything else. But yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Sophie, for that. Move, Sophie. Is there a seconder for this report? Jeff, thank you very much. And Mark.
Yeah, I was going to thank the staff and the councillors who heard who made the hearing panel. It's a great outcome, and as Councillor McInnes has noted, it's effectively a sinking lid. By holding the numbers while our population grows, we have an effective sinking lid policy, and I think that's a great compromise position to be at. So I will be supporting the adoption of this policy.
Thanks, Mark. Any further comments people would like to make? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Declare it carried. Thank you. Thanks, Sue.
Thank you.
The next item is tab 12, Councillor Arts updates on page 71 of today's agenda. And welcome, Nikki. Welcome to the meeting, and Matt. And
Kia ora, and thank you for an opportunity to present the arts report to you today. I expect most of you have met Matt Logan. Matt leads the programming team within the Arts, Culture and Lifelong Learning team, and also leads out our arts program. I'm really fortunate to be able to work with Matt and our other colleague Chloe, who are both trained arts professionals. And I think that's given us a real lift, which we have needed for a while, to begin a new program of arts activities. If you've popped into Te Ara Atia within the last few days, you'll notice there's some rather raucous art now on display upstairs. It's a little less conservative than you might have expected. And we are absolutely thrilled. Chloe has organised this for us, and it is part of the beginning of our journey to showcase to Selwyn residents the potential and possibility of professional art within the district. In the meantime, we still look after council-owned art, but Matt is going to talk very briefly to you about our changed approach to exposing the community to the fullness of the arts world. Matt also will reassure you that we're continuing with an arts program, and it's been normalised within our lifelong learning programs, which we deliver across the district right up to Arthur's Pass. I'll hand over to Matt now, and we'd be delighted to answer any questions from you as well.
Thanks, Nikki. Matt.
Thank you, Nikki. That was very well said. So as you all know, with Te Ara Atia, that's we've combined both, or including gallery, library, and museum experiences. And this has really resulted in us having to recruit people who have those skills, museum professionals and arts professionals. And as Nikki says, that's very much raised the bar for us around our level of professionalism, the expectation that we set for ourselves around how ambitious we are. And I think in time, the expectations of our community as they start to see greater and more exciting types of art in our civic spaces for future projects. So Chloe, in terms of her background, she whakapapas to Taumatu, has a master's in art history, and has worked at public galleries around New Zealand. So this is some of the sort of team members we now have among our ranks. So Pahu, I hope all of you received an invitation earlier this week to the opening next week. It's really exciting, it's colourful, it's unexpected, it's kind of coming off the wall and spilling out of cases. If our previous exhibition was an introduction to some of the spaces and places within Te Ara Atia, Pahu really starts to showcase when we're at full flight, when we're at full speed and full motion, what the arts can do within our civic spaces. I think it'll help people think differently about the architecture. It might change their mood within the space. We think kids will love it. They'll be excited. And we're already starting to see, for example, students from Rolleston College bring their art classes down to talk about the work of Kath Brown, to talk about Piri Kaui and the tuna sculpture Te Heking outside. Yeah, and I also just wanted to touch on performing arts. That wasn't something we included in that report, but as Nikki says, it's become really business as usual within our lifelong learning programs. Things like the Christchurch Symphony Orchestra regularly visit the libraries every year. During Culture Fest, we're doing K-pop and Bollywood dancing. We have bands play at Te Ara Atia, DJ music production. We're starting junior and senior drama classes for kids. Open mic series, guitar lessons. So we are increasingly also operating in that kind of music, performance, theatre, as well as visual arts. Thank you.
Great, thank you for the update. It's really great to see, it was nearly 3 years ago, another round of discussion about public art and the funding that was there, to see the delivery side of that now being landed. The Rolleston Town Centre public art work has had its ups and downs, but getting to the place now where we've got something, I'm looking forward to seeing what that is. You've been very secretive in here as to where that's landed, but the other pieces that are across the district, I think, are an important step as well. So thank you for what you've presented, Mark.
Thank you for the report. I'm very happy to see him to move the recommendation. Question I have is around your council art collection audit. Did it also include is how we're storing the art pieces off display? Because it's been a concern of mine that we've been rather casual with the storage of pieces that aren't on display, and that they in fact have been sort of stuck in a corner wherever we could find space rather than correctly stored. So are we improving our storage? Because I understand that pieces should be rested and taken off display for a while, but we also need to give them the appropriate care and attention while not on display.
So I think part of that goes back to my previous point about some of the professional team members that we've been able to add to our team who have museum backgrounds and art gallery backgrounds. They bring with them some of that professional practice around how to handle and conserve and protect artworks, and that's a combination through appropriately wrapping them and storing them in spaces. We do have opportunities in the future now for more storage space that's been opened up. That's great for us as well. Part of it is actually knowing what's out there. To be able to care for things properly, we really had to understand how much of it there was, and that's including some work that we're doing around appropriately framing some works which were previously unframed. And obviously one of the best ways to protect artworks is to provide an appropriate frame and to do any conservation work that's also required before we frame it.
Well, I look forward in a future report comments on the storage and care of those off display works.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Shane.
Okay, Sam, thank you. Tēnā tātou katoa, Denise, Vicky, Matt. I couldn't help but feel a little bit moved actually around the art space. And I think when we think of culture, it's really the spirit or the mana of our district. And I think that's what's really coming alive. And I'm really enjoying the journey of it and the evolution, I guess, of what our spirit, our wairua within the district is becoming a multicultural. So I'm really excited and thank you very much for your report from your team. I just have one question on the Ellesmere Ward Public Art, and I see the name, the Waihora Whata Road redevelopment, and I wonder if that name, is that a working name at the moment?
Yeah,
It's obviously been gifted, or has it been adopted? And secondly, has there been conversation and collaboration with the Lions public art work that's been proposed?
I can speak to that. Just in terms of Waihora Whātaro, that's the name of the project.
Yes.
So that's it is a project and that is its name. In terms of Whātaro, that is a name that has been gifted by Taumutu for the building that is to be erected. And so the expectation is that that in terms of what's been gifted, the cultural design elements have also been gifted. So the expectation is that that will be the name of the library facility.
And the second question, just on the collaboration with the Lions project, is that something that's been? Sorry.
I guess that was in a previous report that was tabled at council, but there was no, I guess, response from council. So we have not changed the direction, which is that it remains as a public artworks still attached to that development that's planned associated with Leaston and that Waihora Whātaro project.
Thanks for the clarification, Lisa. Thank you. Thanks.
Bob. Yeah, I agree with Mark on looking after what we have. How far are we through having a catalogue of all the artworks that we have got? And the other question is it possible for some of these artworks to end up in our community buildings? Because lots of people, especially over my way, there are certain paintings that were there and they'd like to see them again in the community. So is there a problem with putting them in community halls and such like for security, or how do we go with some of those things?
So in terms of the first part of the question about the audit, we have now a spreadsheet which has a lot more information than we've ever had before about a number of these artworks. We've done some research into how they were acquired, when they were acquired, the background of the artist. So we're starting to be able to tell stories about these artworks too. I think the hope is that in the near future, when Selwyn Stories, our digital repository, comes alive, that information from those internal, what are currently internal spreadsheets, can then migrate and actually be publicly discoverable. So anyone in the community can find out about the artworks that are on display. That'll include good documentation, good images, or background information about the artists. Again, so more information than we've ever been able to share before. A number of the artworks that we're talking about are on display, currently on display at our public facilities, including community centres and our libraries. Are there particular ones at halls that you're referring to?
Oh, sorry, there was one on the pottery at Darfield.
yeah.
And quite a lot of people have asked with that because we haven't seen it for quite a while.
At the
But
Brickworks one?
when I was talking about community halls, I was thinking more like the Glen Tunnel Hall, Coleridge Hall, or whatever, which, in my knowledge, we've never had anything in those sorts of places before. Like that's why I was asking about security and whether we could look at putting some of these things.
Yeah, I agree that security is certainly a consideration with some of these things. But what we really aspire to do is pair up the artworks that we have with their most logical and appropriate location. So it makes sense that if a work about the Malvern area sort of resides in one of our Malvern facilities. So we'll certainly consider whether there's an opportunity with the halls. If there's a particular work, I think the one about the brickworks you might be talking about, that is one of the works we're getting framed at the moment. And a lot of the works came down off of the walls of the Darfield Library prior to the refurbishment. And we're now looking at a course of work about putting things back on the walls now that all the Darfield Libraries reopened after the refurbishment. Thanks.
Thanks, Bob. Deborah.
Thanks for the report. Purchase of artwork. What is council's policy with regards to purchase of artwork, with regards to where we have artists within our community? We did have Arts Heart, which was Selwyn, and then we had the Melbourne Arts Group or Arts Council. And as a council, we used to actually, you know, if there was a stunning piece of artwork, we would, you know, purchase it. And I'm just wondering what's our policy around that, and do we have any funding? And then what's the display of those purchased artworks?
I might just start that conversation in terms of the Public Artwork Acquisition Fund. Council has made, that was the fund that has previously purchased artwork, and it hadn't purchased any specific artwork for some time. And so that was the report that was presented to council that proposed to take prioritise investment in each of the 4 wards around a public artwork. So that money is being expended in that way. But I'm sure Matt and Nikki can talk to you about the approach that they're taking within the Community Services and Facilities Group around the art that they have on display.
So similar to what you can see throughout Te Ara Aotea, rather than having storerooms full of art or objects that we struggle to get on display, we've loaned or everything that's on display at Te Ara Aotea, from the Taonga Māori, from Canterbury Museum, through all of the stuff from Glen Tunnel Museum and different heritage groups and individuals who have all contributed. We're using a very similar approach, or the same approach, with our artworks, where all of the artworks on display, we work with the artists and we loan those works from them, so we can have artworks of sort of national significance on display for a period of time without needing to pay the price tags that come along with artworks of national significance. It also gives us the flexibility to rotate those things out and keep the experience fresh for people. And I think that's an exciting part of Te Ara Aotea, that next week, if you're a regular user, you're going to get a real shock when you come in and there's all these colourful works pouring out of the walls and out of cases and things. That is only possible because we're using an approach where we're loaning work and rotating it rather than purchasing such expensive work.
Thank you for that. Did we have a mover and seconder for this? Mark moved. Bob seconded it. Great, thanks. Any further questions people have? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Declare it carries. Thank you. Next, tab 14, page 88, and it's consent to grant an easement to CPW, and just note the grant. Oh, sorry, I have jumped ahead of tab 13, page 75. Selwyn Community Grants Fund accountability. report. Moved Shane Epihar, seconded Grant Miller. Is there any discussion on this? Mark?
Yes, great report, team, but what I would have found really helpful if there was a little bit more information in the table. A number of times we talk about the grant towards a community event without actually saying what the event was. So the reader who hasn't gone back to the other meetings agendas struggles to understand what event receives support funding. So if in that table, it could be a little bit more specific about what event or events for each group was funded, it would really help the reader understand it and not have to go suddenly searching for some other set of minutes to find out what was funded. So that's just a suggestion for the future.
Thanks.
So that the report is more self-contained.
Thank you for that. And thanks for the report. It's great to be able to see the range of things that have been funded. That was a key part of the setup of this fund, was to be transparent with where it goes, and you read through the different areas where it is, and it's across the district to a huge range of cool activities that go on and so on. So thank you for the support that you've provided. Malcolm?
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you to Kelsey for the hard work you do in compiling everything for us as a panel. Having the information there, I think, speaking on behalf of Jeff and Shane and Jenny, I think it works very well. I think we're a well-oiled machine, and we started off a wee bit lumpy, but we're well aware of the guidelines we're under, and I think it's getting better as it goes. So thank you for the hard work.
Okay, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Declare carried. Thanks, Kelsey. Thanks, Denise. The next item is tab 14, page 88. Consent to grant an easement to CPW. No, Councillor Miller has stepped away from the table. Moved Councillor Alexander, seconded Councillor Epihar. And is there any questions people have of this? All those in favour say aye or raise your hands. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Thank you. Item number, tab 15 on page 97 is the Five Waters update. And Elaine and Murray, welcome to the front of the room. Just start by saying thank you to Murray and the team for setting up the One Water Strategy field trip with our Mana Whenua partners, Ngāi Tuhuriri and Taumotu on Monday with Councillor Reid and Councillor McInnes. It's a great start to a strategy that needs to be in place in a reasonably timely way. So not captured here because it's only happened in the last 2 days, but just want to acknowledge that before you present your report. Murray.
Awesome. So we're presenting our Five Waters report, and I'm going to pass straight across to Elaine for a Springfield water supply update.
Thanks. So Springfield Water Supply, so our contractor is progressing well and has installed the 125p pipeline between Springfield and Annet, and are now well advanced in installing the 180 between Annet and Sheffield. Modifications to the Springfield water treatment plant are on track to be finished at the same time as the pipeline, and so we should be good to go at the end of July, assuming that there's no more issues.
Perfect. We're going to read through reasonably quickly because this is a little bit of an update. In terms of the Three Waters reform, the Water Services Entity Bill has been introduced to government, and we had a workshop with councillors on that this morning, and council will be lodging a submission by the 22nd of July later this month. In terms of community water fluoridation, we had a response back from the Director General of Health. He's identified 14 schemes across New Zealand which have a higher need for fluoridation based on how fast they can have it installed, but more importantly, the size and the needs of the populations. Selwyn has not been identified as one of those priority councils to install fluoridation. Part of our submission to the government was to apply for seed funding for design and concept development. We haven't had any response on that matter. As Sam mentioned, Sam mentioned the One Water Strategy. We had our field trip on the 4th of July, which was, I think, a real good success. Chlorine exemptions. On Thursday, the 23rd of June, we applied to Tamatawai for our first exemption, and that's for the Rakaia Hut supply. I just note there that on Tamatawai's website, they are suggesting a 50 to 65 working day process time frame. So we won't hear back on the success or otherwise of the application before we have to submit other applications. So we'll be applications, but we won't have feedback, unfortunately, until we're well down that track. And probably the last update will just be on temporary coronation, and so I'll pass over to Elaine for that one.
So we're currently planning the district-wide chlorine rollout as required by the Water Services Act. Public notification in both digital and print form, giving residents both advance notice of coming changes and scheme-specific information is now in progress and via our agreed comms plan. If you have any questions, I think everything else is as read.
Thank you for that. Are you also going to cover Taumutu funding? Just thinking about what you have in your report and the public forum we've had this morning. Is there anything that you'd like to update us with or let us know in the meeting?
So Taumutu flooding. Probably not. I mean, in terms of council, we look after the drainage network, we clean that out and also manage the culverts. So the shingle bar, the bankment and all those sort of items aren't rated for or covered by the works we do. So we'd hold that line. We do have a district land drainage committee and we'd recommend that the Taumutu team turn up and come along to that and express their views there. At this stage, they've been absent.
Deborah.
Thanks for that update on the Taumutu culverts. I do know roughly where their location is, and there is a land drainage group that should be bringing to the attention if they need maintenance work to us through the land drainage. Just with regards to chlorine exemptions on page 98, I note that you've submitted Rakaia Huts, Springston and Prebleton. And I'm looking at the chlorine rollout program, which was a draft, and note that these three communities are actually mentioned on the rollout for chlorine. And I just want to understand, are they in for chlorine or out for chlorine? How's that going to work?
Yeah, so to clarify that, all schemes are in for chlorination unless we have we get approval for the exemption through Taumata Arawai. So unless we have that approval to not chlorinate, all supplies will be chlorinated.
Thank you. Grant.
Three things. I'll start with the easy one first, or possibly easy. Fluoridation, there's some mention in other communities that it is a health measure and should be funded by Health New Zealand. Is there any feedback on that, or is it strictly a ratepayer funded cost if fluoridation becomes mandatory in our community?
Yeah, so the government did put up some sort of funding for that. It wasn't anywhere near enough to cover all New Zealand, so I think they're having to prioritise that. I imagine it'll be a mixture of local community and central government funding, but it won't spread for the whole of New Zealand, and so I imagine it's community funded. Our submission recommended that they wait until the new the new water entities stand up, and then that can be funded by them.
Three Waters reform, I note a large number of other communities are, through a communication strategy, encouraging their communities to submit to the select committee. Will we be doing something similar to actually give advice to our wider community, which is one of the things that we get held up for is lack of communication around Three Waters reform? We'll be running some centre of the Selwyn Times or something like that, will we?
Yep, happy to take guidance. I think that was the intention for sure. Yep.
I'm just saying, it seems like we're in a great place to talk about the Taumutu presentation now. Do you want to do that now or at review of?
You can raise it now as part of this. Yeah.
I felt an extreme amount of sympathy for the chap that presented to us at the front of the room today, because it appears his own home is very in danger of the next east and southerly to being inundated with water. But more importantly, I think is that, and probably, and I'm strictly putting it into an ECAN context, is the vision of what Te Wahora looks like in the future. Because if they do nothing, which appears to be what's being suggested at the moment, it appears we're on track to having a large inundation of Selwyn happening, and which potentially could go in any direction, and a permanent estuary opening to the lake. And it seems ironic that perhaps we're not including Taumutu in this discussion, because this is really right at the back behind the marae, and it's potentially in the path of going right through the Rupa and all those sort of places there. So there seems to be a degree of urgency which I'm sorry, I've just forgotten his name. Tim, sorry, Tim, if you're watching, I'm sorry, Tim. that Tim's aware of, and Shane's aware of, but there doesn't seem, from what I'm hearing, a lack an sense of urgency amongst either, particularly ECAN, and to, I suppose, as one of our ratepayers, we should be advocating very strongly on Tim's behalf as to what that looks like. And I think Tim acknowledged himself that the future may hold that property may, under global warming, may revert, but at the moment, without some sort of planning mechanism in place around particularly the inlet and outlet of Te Wahora, this seems to be a really high urgency piece of work. And again, without being there and seeing or having a contractor's hat on, it does appear from what the works that he showed us that were achieved in a relatively short space of time with 3 bulldozers. So the capital sum required is not millions of dollars; it's tens of thousands of dollars of contractors' fees. So it could be quite modest for the safety margin that's put in place. So I got the assurance from you, Sam, that you were going to follow up with ECAN. Is that where we're heading with this?
Yeah, so I'll head down to site, and those that would like to come as well, that was the invitation. Didn't sound like the ECAN connections had worked so far, so I'll also invite John Sunkel as our local council. I'll invite Jenny Huey as their chair to come down on that same visit. That might just be a good way to expose the situation to everyone involved.
Team that manages the lake opening would be valuable partners to be there as well, because they have some real practical knowledge of the mechanics of it and the ability to move ground fast.
Yeah, I think around ECAN have said they're not planning to restore those banks. It would be really helpful if they could explain to the community and us why. That's the important question. They've said they're not going to do it, but there doesn't seem to be, I can't find any information on their website on that decision and why that decision has been made. Let's not forget Ian McKenzie is also one of our ECAN councillors. If we're going to invite Councillor Sunkel, Councillor McKenzie should also be invited because it's his takiwa as well. And it is directly their responsibility. I feel that we're a little bit meat in the sandwich. We have some responsibility because it's our drains that overflowed, but it's our drains overflowed because ECAN's coastal defence has failed, which filled our drains and caused some of that flooding. I agree with Grant that Tamutu should be very concerned, because if these coastal defences aren't restored, the Ngāti Moki Marae seems to be next on the list of places that's going to get inundated in the very near future, which could be within years. And that's a whole big discussion around retreat. And then, as Grant has also indicated, there's a whole big discussion around what happens around Te Waihora in the Lincoln area if it's open to the sea and these kind of swells roll right up the lake. That brings a whole new sort of planning that I don't think we've really had to be exposed to. So, I'm concerned that it's the statement that these coastal defences aren't going to be restored actually has a huge impact above and beyond just those immediate properties on the coast, and they are impacted severely, that we can certainly be advocates for, because I don't believe we have a great deal of fiscal responsibility, but we can certainly advocate on their behalf with ECAN, who does, and we need to understand why the decision not for restoration has been made. It could be that they view this as an ongoing pattern of climate change, and that just keep pushing the shingle back is going to be pushing the rock uphill, but they need to explain it better. And these poor people on the coastline feel abandoned, and that's not good.
Thanks, Mark. James?
Kia ora, just quickly, thank you very much. I concur with Councillor's comments and thank Tim for presenting today. Also, very grateful for the maturity of our council to listen to our concerned ratepayers, and I think it's a real credit to those of us around the table, and also to listen to a person that is basically at his wit's end. So appreciate it, and really looking forward to where we go from here. Chlorination. There is a heck of a lot of concern within the community at the moment, and a lot of feedback coming through. Not obviously helped by some of the horror stories out there around skin and all that type of stuff and taste. But however, we heard this morning that there are parts of our district that are adapting to that chlorination, basically, and I would hope that those stories are shared as well. The stories of where it hasn't been as adverse as perhaps what initially was thought or what is actually being promoted, and how we can get that message out there to perhaps if they're prepared to talk about it. So as a good story. And just around, we spoke about it around the 50 to 65 days for exemption processing periods and that type of thing. I'm just trusting in, I guess, staff when we come towards the 50 to 65 days before the due date of November, whether it's it's up to your expertise in balancing the exemption process, basically. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that process works for us, and if there's any road bumps along the way, it'd be great to hear that in further reports. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the report.
Sam, sorry, Sam, I have another comment.
Sorry, mate.
I left my previous ones directly to that issue. I'd like to thank you for continuing to put the well levels and the soil moisture maps in your monthly report, because it's really interesting. I wouldn't have thought, looking at the soil moisture deficit, that we were still in a deficit as of the 22nd of June. But those maps are very helpful to just understand what's going on in our area in terms of our soil, that I would have thought we'd have been a bit more towards average than dry. So they're very helpful, and it's nice to be able to make them available for our community who may not know where to otherwise find them.
Yeah, there was some really good comments around the Te Awamutu flooding issue. To be fair to say, there's a lot of considerations at play here in terms of who actually owns and looks after that and who funds it. I would suggest, I'm not sure whether it's the right time to suggest this, but that at the next available briefing session, which I think is early August, we invite our staff and ECAM staff to talk to council to give their side of the story, because I think this is this will be a long-lasting issue, and you're dead right that it has an effect on Te Waihora and the whole coastline. So, and I think a lot of communities around the country will be challenged by this.
Did we have a mover and seconder for this report? So I can write it down. Nicole, Shane, all those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Declare it carried. Thank you very much. Register of documents signed and sealed. Mover and seconder for those, Mark?
Yes, I just had a question, and I should have sent it through to staff earlier, about the Southbridge Primary School surrender of lease on a reserve for forestry purposes. Does that leave us holding a forestry block? If we can just have comment on that at some future point.
Note that for future comment.
Seconder for that report.
So,
thanks, Bob. Any further questions? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Declare it carried.
Sam, can I just, before we move into PX, I'd like to apologise to the property staff when I made comments earlier that I hadn't received an update on the opening of Reed's Pit. It appears that I had, and I had missed it, and so my comments in the comments around the confirmation of the minutes were my mistake, not theirs. And so I apologise full-heartedly and without reservation to the staff that had actually done what I'd asked, and it was my fault that I hadn't realised they had.
Thanks, mate. That we move into PX. Nicole and Jenny. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Declare it carried. We'll adjourn the meeting 15 minutes and start again at 3 o'clock.